name's Robert Mari. I got into business broking about 3 to 4 years ago, and I was in corporate services for a long time prior to that. So it was a function of dealing with buying businesses and selling businesses in my own personal capacity, and I found that there was a niche in the market to assist other business owners to achieve a good result for themselves, because there's a big demographic shift with many small business owners now looking to retire. And what I like about the role is that regardless of the industry sector, there are many common elements that apply to a business sale, and many business owners just need an external party to discuss their strategy about how to sell the business. And when you've sold a business more than once, it becomes a much easier process, and most business owners haven't contemplated selling their business over a 15 or 20 year period, so it can be quite a daunting process and they don't know where to start. So that's the key thing. We help them start the process and ultimately try and get them the best result. The key role for a broker to help a vendor prepare their business for sale is to give them some perspective about how their business sits within the market, and that's the overall market for a business sale and also within the sector that they operate in. So a business that's in, say, commercial construction is completely different from a hospitality business, a cafe or something of that nature. And elements involve, understanding how much the owner is involved in the business day to day can affect who will buy the business. So an investor buying a small business does not want to buy a business where the owner is operating 40 to 50 hours a week, because they are not going to be able to take over that function. Whereas someone who is looking to leave their corporate job and run a business because they prefer that lifestyle and flexibility, that won't be a problem for them. The analogy is selling a business is a full-time job. So if you try and sell it yourself, something will suffer and it will be your current business. And one of the most important things for a vendor to consider is that they shouldn't delay the decision to sell so long that they are tired and disinterested in the business. And I don't say that to diminish the work that they're doing in their business, but some vendors come to a business broker at a point where they have had some difficulties or some troubles. The best time to sell a business is when the figures are going north. Sales are going up and things are good, because if you come to a market and your year-on-year sales are dropping, you're going to face a lot of headwinds in finding the right buyer, because every business buyer has an accountant or lawyer in their corner that's advising them, don't buy a business that sales are falling. So it's critical that a business owner is not distracted and highly motivated to increase the sales of their business. And the only way they can do that is by delegating the role of dealing with all the inquiries about selling to a broker. For example, in the business that I sold recently, there were over 180 inquiries in relation to the sale over an 18-month period. The business was in a very sought-after category, and if the business owners had to deal with those inquiries themselves, they wouldn't have been able to operate the business. The sheer volume of questions and detail of information required by those prospective buyers, many of whom were genuine, but logistically they weren't able to complete the transaction. But that's where the broker, by handling those inquiries, takes that pressure off the business owner. Creating a business profile that appeals to buyers is one of the most critical aspects of the service that a business broker provides. A business owner who has been operating their business for sometimes over 20 years becomes so close to the business that they don't actually recognize the unique elements of the business, and often the most positive elements of the business, which they take for granted, but to an external party or someone new to the business, they may not realize just how unique and distinctive that is. So a business broker can often be a very good objective third party to review the business and say, hey, you've got a really appealing asset here and this part of your operation needs to be highlighted. And whether or not that is their inventory management system, their stock ordering system, or their distribution strategy, or their client profile. Recently I had a business that supplied electronic components, and one of their customers was Amazon Web Services, and they just mentioned it in passing that it was Amazon Web Services. And I don't know if anyone knows, but Amazon Web Services is one of the largest electrical component consumers in the world. And so to have them on your books as a client was a huge coup, but to them it was just another client. So drawing out those little Easter eggs of value in terms of the business and presenting it in a business profile is critical. So the other aspect of that is that we have a team of graphic designers, copywriters, and financial analysts that pull together all of the components of a business profile that a genuine buyer will want to see. So it greatly shortens the inquiry cycle for a genuine buyer because that business profile captures the key elements about the business, why you would want to buy this business, what the opportunities for growth are, and what the financial performance has been for the last 3 years. So they're the big value adds to a potential buyer and to a business owner because we pull that together for them. In terms of managing vendors' expectations with regard to the sale process and the length of time it may take, we have to be realistic that it will take longer than most people expect, simply because selling any business has many elements to it, whether it be a license, drafting a contract that is non-standard. It could be a business asset sale contract or a share sale contract. In the business that I sold recently, one of the entities wanted to sell via a business asset sale and the other entity wanted to sell via a share sale agreement. So there was 2 contracts that needed to be drafted in that context. So that extends the length of the negotiations and the interaction with the lawyers and accountants around that sort of thing. So, it's important from the very beginning to set the expectation that it's likely to take longer to sell the business than you might imagine. And that also, it revolves around securing the finance, because even once the contractual terms are agreed in principle, many contracts, just like a property sale, are subject to finance. And the banks don't always operate at the speed that vendors or buyers wish them to operate. Each sales process is unique because each business is unique, and the personalities involved both on the vendor side and the buyer side are unique. So vendors are their business owners and they control the shots within their business. When they're in a sales context, the power moves to the buyer because the buyer is ultimately going to decide whether they want to buy the business or not. So a vendor needs to change their mindset a little bit in terms of responding to buyer inquiries, and even if they appear to be a little bit obvious, you just have to accept that that's the buyer's prerogative to ask that question. And the broker can be a really good buffer between a buyer and a vendor, just to answer all the silly questions that may come up that seem obvious, or present all of the questions in an efficient manner so that the vendor is not repeating themselves ad nauseum to multiple buyers over and over again, which can be very frustrating and can cause vendors to just throw their hands in the air and say, this is all too hard, I don't want to go through this process. So ultimately that goal is to get to a point where an offer is made, but then there's a whole process after an offer is made where all of the legal documentation has to be prepared, and that can be equally frustrating because it gets drawn out by drafting contracts, having finances reviewed by the buyer's accountants and advisors, and then securing the settlement funds. So it's important that all the parties become patient during all steps of that process and are not too judgmental about a buyer's questions, and that's where the broker can help by just dealing with those queries in a professional way that doesn't offend any party either asking or responding to those questions.